Today on the newscast, Russian, Chinese, and Iranian soldiers in the Western Hemisphere, major war games set to take place at America's doorstep in the coming weeks. Get all the breaking details next. Hey folks, Eric Stackelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast, back in the familiar surroundings of the Watchman studio after a great week of vacation with my family. If you missed any of our newscasts from the beach last week, you can check them out here in our archives under Newscast. While you're there, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. Hey, we are fast approaching 500,000 subscribers, nearly 500,000 watchmen and women on the wall following us for such a time as this. So join the team. And yes, I did post some newscasts last week from vacation in the morning before the family woke up because, folks, the Middle East never sleeps. And it's interesting because today we are talking Middle East, but with a Western Hemisphere angle, in particular, Latin America at the doorstep of the country I'm standing in right now, the United States. Big story that the Washington Free Beacon reported on last week. Now that I'm back from vacation, we can dig into it in depth. Russia, China, and Iran are among 13 nations that will send troops to Venezuela in mid-August, just a few weeks away, for the so-called Sniper Frontier competition. Now, these are war games being hosted by Venezuela and hosting in the process anti-American regimes, rogue regimes, adversaries of the United States and really the free world will be in our hemisphere. So much for the Monroe Doctrine that you learned about in school. These enemies will be at America's doorstep again. Russia, China, and Iran leading the pack. Now, a few things here to unpack. Number one, clearly, these regimes, which have adversarial relationships, to say the least, with the United States, they see an opening right now, folks. They see weakness in Washington, D.C. and in the American leadership, and they are pushing the advantage, they're pushing their agenda, and they think they'll be unchallenged as they try to spread their tentacles here to the Western Hemisphere, again, at America's doorstep. So you're seeing a boldness on the part of America's enemies, no doubt. And when it comes to Russia, China, and Iran in particular, again, 13 countries hosted by Venezuela, but they are the most noteworthy, of course, from an American perspective. When it comes to these three nations, they have deeply entrenched and growing ties in Latin America, throughout South America and Central America. Let's start with the Iranian regime. I think of the tri-border region, the so-called tri-border region, where the borders of Brazil, Argentina, and Paraguay meet. Now, for decades, this has been sort of a Wild West type area where the Iranian regime, Hezbollah, their sympathizers have operated, involved in everything from drug smuggling, all sorts of illicit activity, and the money that they make in the tri-border region, they send back to Iran, they send back to Lebanon, Hezbollah's home base, to fund terror operations against Israel. But the tri-border region is only the beginning. And by the way, that may be a really fascinating future newscast to focus solely on what's going on in the tri-border region there in South America. But in the meantime, Iran also has a long-term agreement with Venezuela. And you will notice a thread here, folks. Venezuela, the socialist government of Nicolas Maduro, very cozy with Iran, China, and Russia. But those Iran-Venezuela ties are growing to the point that last month we had a Venezuelan cargo plane that was grounded in Argentina with members of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps on board. Apparently, one of those IRGC members has made over a dozen trips between Iran and Venezuela over the past year. I'm sure it's just for sightseeing, no doubt. So the Iran-Venezuela relationship, which really strengthened under former Venezuelan dictator Hugo Chavez, has only grown under Nicolas Maduro. And you think of the Cuban Missile Crisis, folks, here in the U.S., where you had Soviet missiles in Cuba, really at America's doorstep in the early 60s. Could the Iranian regime eventually attempt to plant ballistic missiles in Venezuela? Is this a crazy scenario to lay out that China, Russia, Iran, or some other rogue actor would try to use South America to plant advanced weapons aimed at the United States? I don't think it's crazy to consider that, considering, number one, that again, the ties between these regimes and Venezuela are deep, and number two, it's to the point where we have soldiers from these nations that will be participating in war games in Venezuela just a few weeks from now. Speaking of Russian soldiers in particular, in the Western Hemisphere, Nicaragua, the Marxist regime of Daniel Ortega, a longtime U.S. adversary, recently invited Russian troops to train on Nicaraguan soil. So we have Cuba, of course, Nicaragua, Venezuela. Then we have other governments rising up throughout Latin American folks. What I can only call a Marxist wave in places like Chile, Colombia, Peru. In Brazil, in a few months, they'll have an election, and the leftist candidate there is also the favorite to win. So a changing of the guard in a very troubling way, a hardcore left-wing Marxist shift in Latin America once again, which is a region that has struggled with that Marxist threat for decades now. It seems to be coming back in a major way. And one thing all these Marxist regimes seem to have in common is definitely a hostility towards Israel, but also, no doubt, a hostility towards the United States. So it should surprise no one that they are inviting in the likes of Russia, China, and Iran. What will the response be by the United States, by the Biden administration? Unclear so far, and we hope to have more details about this frontier sniper competition at Venezuela, these war games that Venezuela will be holding in August. And when we do have more details, we will bring them to you here on the Watchman Newscast. How will Biden respond? Well, he's heading to the Middle East this week, as a matter of fact. He'll be in Israel on Wednesday and Thursday, also paying a visit to Saudi Arabia, which should be mighty interesting, and will also pay a visit to Palestinian areas outside of Israel. So this is going to be a very important week, folks, especially vis-a-vis Iran's nuclear program. What will Biden say when he's in Israel? And what will that look like? We will be reporting on it here on the Watchman Newscast. In the meantime, as I wrap up here, Russia, China, Iran are the main subjects, along with North Korea, of a brand new TBN 1-hour special that I am hosting tomorrow, Tuesday, July 12th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on TBN. It's called The Gathering Storm Against America. Here's the trailer. Take a look. The storm clouds are gathering. Enemies are on the march, and America is in their crosshairs. From Russia to China to Iran and North Korea, the U.S. is facing its most perilous global challenges since World War II. Are we on the verge of a new world war today? And with our nation divided, can we prevail against rogue regimes that seek our demise? Watch The Gathering Storm Against America only on TBN. Folks, I strongly encourage you to tune in to The Gathering Storm Against America. We lay out, look, not only the problems, but the solutions. And the ultimate solution is this nation, the United States, turning back to God. That's the ultimate answer for the troubles we are facing. We can't get there. We can't get back to where we need to be as a nation without God leading the way. We're going to dig into all of that with some great guests tomorrow night. Colonel Alan West, Colonel Richard Kemp, Oliver North, Joni Ernst, Senator Joni Ernst, Pastor Jack Hibbs, many more. It's going to be a very powerful show. We encourage you to tune in. That is tomorrow night, July 12th, and hopefully we'll eventually get it on the YouTube channel as well. But we'd love for you to tune in so we can have a lot of viewership for this special, because we believe these issues are important and they need to be reported on for such a time as this. Hey, thanks so much for joining us today. Until tomorrow, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. If you enjoyed this episode and want to see more, make sure you go ahead and hit the like button, click subscribe, and tap the bell icon to turn on notifications for new Watchman Newscast episodes every weekday.